Welcome to my channel, Joey.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Joey is a former elder, former pioneer, former Bethelite, and he also was in the temporary circuit work.
That's it.
So we're going to get a glimpse into what he experienced during his journey into the religion and his journey out of the religion. So, Joey, I'm just so excited to have you here and hear about this story. And so, without any further ado, how did you get introduced to the Jehovah's Witnesses?
So I'm originally from California. I grew up there. My family moved to the East Coast, Boston. And when I turned, I think it was like 19 or something like that, 20, 19, some in that age group, I decided to go back and live with my grandfather in California. So I was born in Santa Cruz, California, and I grew up there. And that's where I got contacted. The door-to-door work. Crazy story though. What's really bizarre, because I never figured out how they did this, but somehow my uncle, me, and my grandfather all had the same first name, Joe or Joseph. And so one day there was a knock at the door, and I opened up, and somebody was looking for Joseph. No, let me back up a bit. So what originally happened is I had met somebody in the door-to-door work. Somebody was just doing the territory. You know how we would Jehovah's Witnesses would have like a certain territory to do. So anyway, so they contacted me. We had a little conversation. They showed, I think it was The Truth That Leads to Eternal Life, that blue book.
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, so I was busy because I was really doing some work for my grandfather. I was painting his house. And, so I just said, whatever. Anyhow, so months
And
had
did
gone
you
by.
say you were 19?
Right. So I was about 19 at the time, and time had gone by. I think it was like 3-4 months. And so I was again outside doing some more work on the house, because painting the house, it's not like, it was a pretty big house. So it took me about 3-4 months because I had a regular job. So naturally, I did a little bit at a time. So anyway, so somebody came by looking for Joseph Volpe. So my last name is Volpe. So Joseph Volpe. So since that was my grandfather's house, and at the time I wasn't really connecting the dots because he was dressed in a suit. So I thought maybe it's just some insurance salesman or what have you. So I said, "Oh, that's my grandfather." He says, "He's in the back." So they came back about 3 minutes later, and my grandfather didn't speak much English, just a little broken English. He says, "No, it wasn't him. It was a younger person." And again, I think it was a return visit. So somebody had given this brother a return visit, which I totally forgot that I had met somebody. And then I thought, well, it must be my uncle because he works in the barbershop down the street, same street, but just further down, maybe like 6 or 7 blocks. So he goes away, and I didn't think anything of it. He comes back a week later, and he goes, "Hey, thanks for sending me to your uncle. He's a pretty nice guy, but he wasn't the Joseph that we were looking for." So I'm like, Then he showed me the book, and that's when it clicked. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, it was. I remember that book. It's The Truth That Leads to Eternal Life. So anyway, so we had a long conversation. Nice brother, kind of we clicked because he was into doing car pinstriping. He was close to my age. He gave me his whole story, how him and his wife were gambling one day in Las Vegas, and they lost all their money, whatever. And they had this book. They went back to the hotel and read it, and they go, "Wow, we should start studying." So anyway,
Wow.
That's kind of weird. It was kind of cool, brother, to share his whole life story right there on the door with me. But little by little, I started to think, and I'm like, that's interesting. And I went back to Boston. I moved back to Boston because I was in and out of bands, and I was in a band at the time, and they needed me to come back. And anyway, long story short, I went back to Boston, and the witnesses followed up somehow, some way. They contacted my mother because I was staying with my parents at the time. and I started studying in Boston, which is the weirdest thing. I never thought, that I would pick up from that door conversation that I had with this California brother. So that's how,
I
and
do have a
six.
question about that. Do you think did they know where you exactly moved to and maybe sent somebody to your door, or were you contacted randomly again in Boston?
It was random because they didn't know. I never gave him my address, but I gave him my phone number. And that's a freaky episode because what happened is I started studying, and about 6 months into the study, I remember this brother, Glenn Colombo, and I remember calling him and I go, "Hey, Glenn, I don't know if you remember, this is, Joe, you met da 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 da." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, man, what's going on?" And I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm probably, going to get baptized like in another 3 or 4 months or whatever." So he's like, "Wow, man, that's really so cool." So that's how that whole connection from California, I would say the seed was planted, if you will, of the JWs coming. And then I continued and eventually got baptized in Boston.
Wow. Wow. So then what was next for you in the journey?
So I was in a interesting congregation. It was a congregation in Medford, Massachusetts. It was, back when they were renting Kingdom Halls. Like this was way, 1900s, I think. I'm just kidding, but no, it seems like it was a long time ago. And yeah, that's what was happening. The quick bill didn't even exist back then. It was just basically you used a hall, you rented a hall, or what have you, and that's just how a lot of the JWs, would have their meetings and so forth. And I just started. I was in a band, so I was playing in the band, and that was sort of the I was juggling because I had super long hair. I used to have hair like Steve Tyler. Like, in fact, I hung out with those guys because we toured a little bit, and so I remember sharing dressing rooms with those guys, Aerosmith,
Wow.
Boston, and all those guys. Oh yeah, I was, so at that time making the transition, because I would tell some of the witnesses, that I'm playing here and that you want to come, whatever. So a couple of the brothers, from time to time, they would show up at one of the venues that we would be performing at, and eventually, I just started making some changes, cut the hair, got a little bit more, because I used to just come to the meetings like in anything that I felt like coming, like, nobody ever, and that was the coolest thing though, because nobody ever made fun of me. Like literally, I would come with like a full beard sometimes, or just like long hair, just like a hippie. Like I would look just like, like a musician, somebody, just like imagine Steve Tyler just showing up at
Sure.
your meeting one time. I'm just taller than him. But anyway, nobody ever made fun of me. Nobody, so that was kind of like unique for me because I was sitting there like waiting for somebody to come up and say, "Man, why don't you cut your hair, man?" Or like, "Who do you think you are?" None of that. So that was kind of and I've heard this said before, Jehovah's Witnesses, the one thing that some of them are good at is love bombing you, right? So you
They
get
were giving
attacked.
you some leeway there, right?
Oh
They
man.
didn't want to scare you off yet.
No, and that really wasn't. It was attracting. I mean, that's one of the things that attracted me to want to continue to pursue it because I had been searching for something spiritual. Because when I was growing up as a kid, I'd stay with my grandparents, and my grandfather was this religious Italian guy who would every day open up his Italian Bible at 3 in the afternoon, every day, clockwork. And I'm like, wow, there's got to be something to that. Like, why is he reading his Bible every day? So subliminally, it just had this thing that it must have carried on with me as I grew up. And I just decided there's got to be something to this, And then I started searching. I went to like everything. I went to like born again Christians, evangelicals, Church of Scientology, um,
Wow.
Christian Science, Mormon. I mean, I was just like dropping in, Baptists. I almost got baptized one time as a Baptist because I go to their meeting and the guy goes, okay, now next week, make sure you bring your bathing suit so we can get you baptized. I'm like, this is the first time I'd ever been to a church, his church, and he's already got me baptized. He's already dunking me like the next week. I'm like, really? That's how you guys do it, man. That's
Wow,
okay.
that was easy.
I know. So, but about 9 months or so after I started studying, I just decided that was, something that it made sense because I used to ask them questions. We went through all the different hellfire, and I was raised as a Catholic. So for me, it was pretty like just making those decisions. And at the time, I never really questioned the New World Translation as much because back in those days, I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses, which I didn't know this until I learned it, used to read from the King James Bible up until like 1950s or something like that. So I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting, that you guys use the King James Bible. And then it morphed into their own translation, the New World Translation. And compared to what it is today and what it was when I started studying, I mean, obviously I could tell you it wasn't so aggressive in changing like complete words and complete like paragraphs that wouldn't
to match their doctrine.
Correct. So back then it wasn't as crazy. I mean, and that was one of the things, that a lot of us have seen like over time. It's like, man, what are you guys turning into? Like who's in your translation department? Like what the heck are they? So,
and I feel like a lot of the younger ones wouldn't even know that.
Right.
And they're just told that, they have the best translation out there. And yeah, I believed it too. But the more I've studied and researched, you realize it's absolutely not. In fact, it's probably one of the worst translations. And but like going back to what you said, if you've been in the religion long enough, you'll see, all these changes they've made in that Bible to better match the doctrine, their narrative.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So anyway, I eventually got to the point where I was looking to make progress and, being around like elders. I used to have a study with this elder who was also a regular pioneer, and it's almost like birds of a feather flock together. So if you hang out with elders and pioneers, it's going to rub off. And so I naturally just wanted to be like them. So I'm like, hey, what do I have to do to do what you do, to be an elder? Well, let's get you, because it's not just knowledge, but it's also the ability to teach and become someone who others would look to as you can set the lead, like be an example. Mm-hmm. And, coming from the music world and the lifestyle that you live, obviously there was a lot of changes that I had to make. So that was kind of
was that challenging?
It was at first. I'm not going to lie, because it's just who you hang out with. It's just like what you're doing. Although I never really was into like drugs or alcohol, or didn't do a lot of that stuff because I'm a percussionist, so I'm a drummer. So it's almost like you're operating machinery. Like you need your cognitive
all your
abilities,
faculties,
coordination. I mean, that is definitely, yeah. So I was fortunate there, but nonetheless, I definitely didn't mind having a drink here or there. I got to share this really quick. So there was this anointed brother who took over for me. No, before I studied with this elder, somehow he wanted to study with me or whatever. So somehow he got to have a Bible study with me for like maybe a month or two. And he was an alcoholic. This guy, he was an anointed alcoholic, man.
Really?
Oh my gosh. This guy, one day I brought over a gallon of red wine. I think it was whatever, Pastine or whatever the brand was, but it was like a whole gallon. Because my dad being Italian stuff, he would buy it. So I asked him, I said, can you pick up an extra one because I want to bring it to this witness. And so I brought it as a gesture, like, hey, here, like I didn't expect I was going to drink it or anything like that. So I brought it to him. And that was that. We had the Bible study. And then the next week I came back for another Bible study. He drank the whole gallon himself. This guy was wasted. He was so drunk, man. And he used to live with his other brother. And they got into like a pissing match between each other, and it just got like, you know what? I'm just going to have to leave. I'm sorry. But we couldn't have the study because he was just like slurring his words and everything like that.
Oh, during the study.
And he got he got disfellowshipped a month later for drunkenness. Wow. Somebody else ratted on him. I didn't rat on him, but
you didn't even have to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So somebody else had ratted on him. But I sort of felt like I enabled him because I brought him the gallon of wine. I'm like, dude, I didn't expect you were going to drink the whole thing, like all in one sitting. And especially like before a Bible study, like, what were you thinking? I'm like, okay. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But I still got baptized. So they moved me from him once he got his fellowship to this elder who was a regular pioneer, and that's who carried me all the way through to baptism. It was this
okay.
brother. And he was smart. This guy was super smart, did a lot of studying, and I used to go out and field service with him, and we used to go to all the college campuses because he was hitting all these, like he'd go, I remember one time we were at the New England, we were having I think it was having a Bible study with one of the New England Patriots who had just been brought on and signed on by the Patriots. And he was this big dude, man, like, it was like probably 6'5" or something like that, just built and just, obviously he was like either a linebacker or something. And it was funny because one day we were going out in service and I happened to be with this brother, this regular pioneer. And somehow she was doing, the sister, she was alone, she was by herself, was doing this territory, and his house happened to be in that territory on the Tufts University campus. So she knocks on his door, and this is a story we heard later. And this football player comes to the door completely naked, right? I'm like, he's not wearing anything. And she's trying to have a conversation, like trying to maintain eye contact. I cracked up afterwards because his name was Mark Boobin. And it was funny because she told us the story when we went on coffee break. And the brother, who was with us, that was his study. He didn't know that he was home. So anyway, we just cracked up. It was just a funny experience that obviously you've had crazy experiences, and that was one of the things about going door to door is it's an unnatural thing for people to just go, like, because I
show up and all that.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Like nobody's expecting you. And, it's almost like you feel like you're a door to door salesman or you're in some kind of sales because that's what you're really peddling is some.
Yeah. You really are in sales. You're selling your religion. Yeah.
Right.
Or your cult. Yeah.
Thank God I never had, of all the years of doing that, I only got chased by one guy with a rifle one time because he had a big this was in North Carolina one time. I was doing almost like an unassigned sort of territory or whatever. And this dude, farmer type guy, comes out with his rifle and he says, "Can't you see the signs? There's no trespassing. Do I need to, whatever?" And he was like almost going to point his gun at us. I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." So I'm like, "Okay, you're cool."
Peace out.
Right. I guess we have to start wearing Kevlar vests or something, man, because I'm like, there's just no understanding people sometimes. I mean, but I get it. I mean, now obviously because of the way the world is so crazy. I mean, can you imagine somebody coming to your door now in some of these places that have high security, gated communities where you have a guard shack, or like you need somebody to let you in. And so it's just, and that's why this whole thing, going back from when I was starting to go door to door, and then now I've heard from others, they write letters. Like everybody's, especially during COVID, people were just sitting there making phone calls, writing letters and things like that. And that's how you count your time. Of
Yes.
course, then now you don't even have to count your time. Now I'm like, oh, okay, great.
Oh, it's so crazy. Yeah. Well, we know why they're not counting time, right?
Right.
The numbers are dropping so badly. They're like, "Ah, let's just not even count it. We don't want to show how bad they are." Yeah.
Amen to that. Oh my gosh, yeah. And then, I did follow in the footsteps. Eventually, I became a pioneer, because that was one of the things that everybody, at the time, I married a sister who was a regular pioneer, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
almost,
Okay.
yeah. So her parents were like, her father was an elder, and that was like trying to get through the Gestapo, man. It was just like you had to be a regular pioneer, a ministerial servant, like you had to basically ask his permission if you could even date his daughter. I'm like, oh my God. It's like,
Wow.
well, like what is up with that? Just to go out on a date. I mean, you have to, have like the what's Trump have? So Secret Service,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
like I'd have to have Secret Service chaperone just to go out on a date with somebody, man. It's like, okay. Yeah, like she had 5 sisters or 4 sisters. So I went out on a date. I had to take all her, like 3 or something of her sisters out and pay for all of them just to go out on a date with this sister. I'm like, are you serious? It
How
was,
old were you guys at that point?
I had just turned like 24, I think, 24,
Okay.
25. And, it was just the idea though. It was like, I think she was 20. I was like 4 or 5 years older than her. And it was just the way he went about it. And, but like I said, I knew I liked the idea of pioneering. I was a full-time, I had a full-time job working 40, 50 hours a week. And obviously you can't pioneer, with the hours back then, because it was, I think, 90 hours back when I was trying to pioneer. So, that's kind of hard to work a 40, 50 hour a week job and put in those type of hours. So eventually I started my own business, became an entrepreneur, and did what a lot of, I'll put it in quotes, witnesses back in that time period. I don't know if they still are doing it, but everybody was like, oh yeah, just start a cleaning business. So that's what I did.
Oh, yeah.
I had a great cleaning business. I had some accounts where I used to do like like about 6 or 7 or 8 gyms, and I could do them at night, like when they were closed, like they close at 9 or 10 o'clock. I'd go in from 11 to 2 in the morning. I'd clean them all. And then I had some offices that my, at the time, wife her and I would do some offices during the day. And it was pretty cool. Like we ended up living in a Kingdom Hall. So once I became a pioneer, then I was appointed to be a ministerial servant and went to help other Kingdom Halls. And we got to live like almost like a circuit overseer, when they would build these little apartments, whatever, for
Like
COs.
casinos on the side.
Right. So
Okay.
this had a little, like a 2-studio apartment, you could say. Like a bed, a kitchen, a bathroom. That's basically kind of all it was. And they used to use it because it was in the Kingdom Hall. It was right next to the main auditorium of the Kingdom Hall. So they would use that sometimes as a third school. They had like 3 schools.
Oh,
They had,
wow.
yeah. So I'm like, oh man, I got to keep my house clean. I had to clean it every week. I mean, not that I was not clean, but of course,
Yeah.
it was just a
Spruce it up.
right, spruce it up, just make sure, whatever. And so it was kind of cool, and then I just kind of keep the timeline going. So I was active doing that. I love to travel. And one of the things that I loved as a pioneer, is that I could just travel. Like I love to go to California, go visit different states, and then of course visit different countries. And I don't know if you recall, but there used to be international assemblies where you could go and be a delegate to an international.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah. Those were like big deals.
oh,
Yeah.
they were. And so, they would put out, okay, is there any volunteers is there any brothers or whatever that would like to volunteer to be like a car captain person for a group that's going to this international convention? So I, raised my hand. I said, sure, why not? So this one was in Zurich, Switzerland, right? Which I had never been. And so I thought, why not? So we booked our airfare. There was like about maybe 30 delegates from different congregations in our circuit, I guess you could say. And so I met with them, so we flew there, we stayed. What I did is back then, I don't know how it's morphed to today, but back then you could call up every branch. So I called up the Rome branch, the Swiss branch in Switzerland, the German branch, the Austrian branch. I called like 4 or 5 branches and said, hey, brother, I'm coming with my wife. We're going to be going to this convention. And I was told at Bethel, New York, that I could, as a regular pioneer, I could stay there up to 4 days. That was the deal. So I got free room and board at all of these branches. So I basically didn't have to pay anything. We stayed at the branches, 4 days in Germany, 4 days in Switzerland, 4 days in Austria, 4 days in Italy. And
Well,
when
that was a perk.
big time perk. So, there were some, pluses and minuses. Obviously you can always say the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. I can't complain about those kind of perks because I love to travel. So for me, and I'm bilingual, so for me it was like going to Italy is not a big deal. My wife at the time, she was German, although she didn't speak much German. Her relatives were German. But you pick up those little books when you go, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay. How much does this cost? Or you pick up a few phrases, whatever. So that's what we did. And when I got down to Rome, the brother there, the coordinator, is
Now,
really.
let me just stop
Yeah.
you there and ask a question. Were you able to stay at those branches because because were you still a ministerial servant at that point?
Right, but you didn't have to be a ministerial servant as long as you were in the full-time service at that
That's what
time.
it was. Okay.
Yeah.
That's where I needed clarity. Okay. So you
Yeah.
got to the Rome Bethel,
Branch, right?
Branch.
Rome Bethel. Yep. So
Okay.
it's interesting that they would give you the same. They would look at you as a Bethelite. So as long as you were in the full-time service, whether it's a pioneer, a special pioneer, or Bethelite, you would be granted those privileges, those perks, as you said, which I only learned by having. I had friends in high places in Bethel, New York, back in the day, when the Watchtower Society actually was the Watchtower Society, and they had the big sign, read the Watchtower daily.
Yeah.
And all
or
that.
read the Bible daily. Yeah.
Yeah, read the Bible daily, not the Watchtower. But it was interesting that that it was a big thing there. Everybody that would cross the Brooklyn Bridge. That's kind of how. And I used to live, I think, 3.5 hours drive each way. So I would drive from Boston to New York and work there for a month, get all my pioneering time in 2 weeks. So I'd get hour for. What they did is if you worked 80 hours, they would credit you your whole month. So I didn't have to pioneer for the whole month. I only had to go to Bethel for 2 weeks. And then I did the same thing the following month. So I think there was a building they purchased called the 360 Furman Street building. And I volunteered to get into the construction crew. So I did construction, which, you get to meet brothers from all over the country, really, which was kind of cool, and stay at their hotel and eat with them. And that's when I got to meet like Ray Franz, because at the time Ray Franz was still sitting at the table. You know, he was
Wow.
not kicked out of Bethel at the time.
At that
Yeah,
point.
at that point. But you learn a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and that's where like Barbara Anderson was working at the time. She was in Bethel at that time. She
Oh,
knew a lot
wow.
of she knew a lot of the people that I knew, like because when I talked to her on the phone, she was like, oh yeah, I remember them, and we were just talking about different things that she knew, her and her husband. And,
And if
so
there's anybody watching this interview that doesn't know who Ray Franz or Barbara Anderson is, please Google their name, and
right,
that will tell you everything. These are very important people within the organization that were whistleblowers.
right,
So,
yeah,
sorry, I just wanted to mention that in case we had some new people that aren't real familiar with certain names that are very important names and important people that were high up in the organization
yeah.
that were whistleblowers. So I'm sorry.
Now,
Go ahead. So
no,
I
well
didn't mean to interrupt.
that brought me to a place when I came back from. So I was saying, so we did the international convention, and the reason why I brought up the branches is because the branch in Rome, that was the last branch that we went to visit. We did the convention. I think it was 3 days, and then after the convention was over, we drove down to Rome and did sightseeing. I mean, it was I used to love BMWs, so I still drive a BMW, and it's so
I
cool
love
because
BMWs too. I've had one.
oh,
I don't
okay.
right now, but I have had one. Yeah.
Well, I learned when I was in the cleaning business. I used to work for this professor at I think it was Harvard, and she was a lesbian. Her and her gay partner. Um, I used to clean, my wife and I. So anyway, long story short, she had this magazine called The New Yorker. On the back of The New Yorker was how to buy a BMW and save thousands by taking a European delivery. So I'm like, her sister married somebody who bought a BMW, and I fell in love with it. I took it for a ride. I saw it. I'm like, I got to get one. And that's when I started doing research. So I got my first BMW. I picked it up in Germany and went to the convention. That year that I went to the convention, because I sold that BMW the first BMW I bought, I sold it. Then I went and did it again. I did it like 6 times. I went to Germany because you could do it. Like you could buy a BMW, you take delivery in Europe, and then you drive it all around. Then you bring it back, and then you could sell it, and it paid for your whole trip because the cost of what you saved was way more than how much your trip would cost, right?
Wow.
And that was the year that I met this sister from California, from Temecula, California. That's right. I met this sister. She was a chiropractor, her and her son. Oh, wow. I just remembered this story. While I was going down to Rome, I met her at the convention. And long story short, her and her son were going down to Rome to visit the branch too, because he was a pioneer. So he got to stay at the branch too. So we just, how you meet different people. So I go, hey, you want to ride? I'm going down there with my wife. We're going to stay there too. So might as well ride with us. So they did. And while we're driving down from Switzerland down to Rome, Italy, you ask questions. It's like, wow, this is a nice car. Is this a rental? I said, no, I bought it. She goes, you bought it? I said, yeah. I gave her the story that I told you. And she goes, what are you going to do with it? Because I had another BMW back in the States. So I didn't need 2 of them. This one I was just going to use for the trip and then sell it. And so she goes, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, I'll probably just sell it. She goes, oh, can I buy it? And I'm like, seriously? This sister gave me $1,000 deposit right then and there. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
I'm like, are you serious? She goes, no. She took out her checkbook. I gave her the price, how much I wanted for it. She goes, okay. And do you know that when I went back to the States, she flew her 2 sons from California all the way to Boston. I picked them up at the airport. They had their tags, their California tags. They drove it cross country. 10 years later, I called his sister just to see how she's doing. I says, hey, how's the car? She goes, oh, I love it. She goes, I says, how many miles? She goes, I got 100,000 miles. I love the car. It's great. I said, BMWs, those cars will last. And so that was a great story. It
Oh,
just
that's a great story. Yeah.
it helps you appreciate, because I'm the type of person, I love to meet people. Like I love to just, especially that's why I love to travel, because I'm very outgoing, outspoken. Being a musician, you're in front of people anyway. So you just, and I always love to just meet new people and just create a network, whatever. But coming back at that Rome Bethel, the brother who was the coordinator came up to me the last day that I'm leaving to come back to the States, and I thought he was kidding around. He goes, "Hey, so how would you and your wife like to come and work at Bethel here in Italy, in Rome, Italy?" And I'm like, "For real?" And he's like, "Well, go to your room, think about it, and give me an answer the next morning." That's we
Oh,
were leaving.
wow.
So I'm like, "Wow, this dude's serious, man. He's not like playing around, because Italians sometimes, they have ways of joking." And I thought maybe this is probably all he's doing. He's just pulling my leg, like, "Oh, yeah, how serious? Like, really? Like, oh, sure. Who's not going to say, yeah, sure, I'd love to come and, get all the Italian food you want, man, wine or whatever."
But
And
you were in the full-time work and you
right,
spoke fluent Italian.
Italian, right, right. And that's what I figured. I said I might as well say yes, because even though my wife was kind of hesitant, at the time, she was like, well, she didn't speak Italian and she didn't know, and be away, being away from her family for a long
Family.
time. Yeah, it's like being a missionary. It's like going into missionary service without having to go through the Bethel. What's the school that they had for missionaries? Um,
Oh, um, oh, I know what you're talking about.
like
I can't
missionary
remember it.
school or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But anyhow, so she said, "Yeah, okay, I'll try it." So that's what we did. We went back. I told the brother, "When do you want me here?" And this was July. He said, well, "Can you be here by the end of August?" So,
Wow.
we packed all our stuff, and we were staying at a Kingdom Hall as pioneers in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I went back, and this is going to blow your mind, but this is how people's minds, some of these mindsets that some of these witnesses have. It's not like, I don't know, like I don't want to say anything, like maybe it was a personal thing with that brother's personality, or maybe it was just how they felt towards us, because I came back and I said, "Hey guys, I'm going to give up this apartment because we just got invited to go to Bethel, Rome, Italy, so we're leaving." And they were trying to talk us out of it.
Really?
Yeah, like,
Wow.
"Oh, well, are you sure? And, are you sure it's the right thing? And how do you know? Aren't you worried?" Or like trying to put fear into us, trying to make us think like, what? I'm like, why would he do that? Like, why wouldn't you be happy? Like the Bible says, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. So I was like, why wouldn't you be happy that we're getting to go into a better assignment, you know, to go to Bethel? Like, why would you make us feel like, oh, you sure? And then they kind of distance themselves. Like once, we made our decision that we were going to go, we were packing our stuff up, and we told them that we would be out like in 30 days or something. And I just felt like
Were
they
they
were,
maybe jealous of the adventure?
yeah, like just creating this kind of like, like going like this to us, like just saying, "Oh, F you guys," like we're
Mhm.
glad to get rid of you. Like,
Oh my
I'm
god.
like, wow, that's how you really feel. Okay, well, that's nice. And we were there for 4 years helping the congregation out. So that's the thank you kind of the way they treated us. It was just weird, and that was kind of one of the things that started to really eat at me subliminally, like just over time, like it's almost like,
Interesting. Mhm.
because it makes you see this organization is political. There's no two ways about it. It's very cliquey, very political. It's who you know. There's all kinds of like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to get this fellowship because my dad's an elder," or, like, "Oh, okay, so because it's who you know, they're going to favor you, but somebody else." It's just like in politics today, right? It's just exactly how politics are. It's just the same. And I just started to see that, and you don't want to believe it. Like, they try to make excuses for them and try to say, oh, it's just probably that personality. And what did they used to say? Well, you can always go to another congregation. Just move to another congregation. If that congregation isn't good for you, then well, why? Like, why don't you apply the principles that you are preaching and teaching in and make people understand that that's no, it's just. And that was kind of what was getting, because I remember hearing stories of even back when I was an elder. And by the way, I was appointed an elder when I came back from Rome, Italy, as a missionary or whatever from that 2-year assignment.
Full-time, yeah, in the full-time work.
The brothers at the Kingdom Hall congregation that I attended, they saw that and wanted me to be an elder because of all the experience or whatever that I had doing that job or that role. And so that's when I became an elder, when I came back from that assignment.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and I still pioneered. And that's when I started having like assembly parts, dramas, being in the drama, being giving talks at conventions, and just doing the horse and pony show, going around giving talks. Oh, and this, I have to share this because this happened to me and it spread throughout the whole circuit. When I was giving talks, I went to Salem, Massachusetts. That's the witch city, right? Salem.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You heard about the Salem witches? So
Yeah.
I'm giving a talk at the Salem Kingdom Hall in Salem, Massachusetts one morning. Actually, it was like a last minute talk. Like the guy calls me the night before and says, hey man, our speaker's sick or whatever. Can you kind of short notice show up? And I'm like, oh man, really? So I said, yeah, sure. And I gave him I had a bunch of outlines. So I just picked an outline, so it's like, okay, here's an outline. Yeah, this will work. So it's like, sure, man. So I show up, and this is an honest to God's truth. And this, I wouldn't have imagined it. If you had told me this happened to you or somebody I'd be like, really? But this is a true story. So this really happened. So I'm at the Kingdom Hall, doing, like, it would be a public talk, then Watchtower. That's kind of how the meeting structure was set up, right? So they're doing the public talk. So I get up, I start doing the public talk, and I think I get maybe like not even 5-10 minutes past the introduction, and I think I'm looking up a scripture, something like that, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I think I have my Bible up or something like this, looking at scripture, and I see this dude coming in. And this dude from the top, he's wearing like a sports coat or suit jacket, with no tie, but just like a shirt. And then nothing below, like naked under, like no pants, nothing, right? And sneakers. And I'm like, oh my word. And this dude is like walking toward the platform. He's walking toward me. Just kept coming. And I'm looking at this dude and I'm like, are these guys like, where's the attendance? Like, I'm thinking this while I'm giving the talk. And I'm like, is this dude
Where's
really?
my security? Where's my security?
I know, right? And so that's when I'm like, okay, Jehovah, if this dude comes up, because you don't know, man, there's crazy people and just whack jobs. I mean, this guy could have had a gun. I mean, who knows, right? So he comes right up to the stage, looks at me, and I'm looking at him. And again, nothing happened at this point. Nobody's coming up. Nobody's getting nothing. He reaches into his coat pocket, and like, I'm thinking, oh my God, what is he going to take out? And you know what he pulls out is the awake. You remember the awake with the skull with the cigarette hanging out of it?
I didn't know, not off the top of my head. I don't remember.
It was an awake article, like, I can't remember the year, but it was an awake article. And all I remember is he holds this awake up and he's just going like this, starts screaming at the top of his lungs, yelling. And at that point, the talk was done. The talk was over. At that point, I'm like, okay, can we get some help here? And then like 2 or 3 elders come down and they all surround him and nobody's trying to touch him. They don't want to put their hands on him. And come to find out, it was a sister in that hall's son who had been furloughed from an insane asylum. He was in an insane asylum, and I guess he had been furloughed for the weekend because it was a Sunday. And somehow he ended up taking a cab or whatever. But I'm like, dude, put some freaking pants on. I'm like, what are you like? Okay, I like the sport coat. That's good. You gotta wear some, underwear. You gotta have some pants and underwear, dude. I'm like, seriously.
Oh my gosh.
So they called
wow, what a story.
Yeah, they called they put him in they actually brought a straitjacket and they put him in a straitjacket.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the police were called then?
Yeah. And that talk, I think I gave the conclusion. So about 30 minutes were eaten up, just waiting for the cops and stuff to show up. And the brother comes up to me and he says, "You still want to finish the talk?" And I said, yeah, let me just do a 5-minute conclusion. And I closed with the scripture. They all applauded as if I had given like a 45-minute talk. And they said, after the talk, they go, "Wow, that was really, you handled that really well." Because, I mean, who knows? Like you don't know. I mean, because there's nothing I could do. But after that, I thought, you know what? I'm not so into these public talks as much as I thought anymore. Like it became like, yeah, I've been performing in all kinds of venues. I never had that kind of a situation.
Somebody rushed the stage.
Crazy.
Now, is this before or after you served at the Rome branch?
After.
That was after. Okay. Did you have anything interesting happen while you're at the Rome branch?
Funny you should ask. So yes, there were some interesting things that happened there. And again, just because it is in a foreign language or in a foreign international setting doesn't necessarily mean that, crap doesn't happen, because it does. Okay. Just like stuff happens in the United States branches, like at New York and so forth, they just sweep it under the rug. And that's typically why the outside doesn't know or hear of a lot of this stuff, like the court cases that are the pedophile court cases that go on and so forth. The publishers, the rank and file, never really knows that because it's not public. It's not like you're not going to see it on jw.org and so forth, right?
Yeah, so, they're not going to make that public. And you're, as a rank and file or a witness in general, you're not supposed to go and look at anything outside of their own publications and propaganda.
Right. But it was during my stay at the Rome branch, I met a circuit overseer who had also been invited with his wife to come and serve and help in, I think it was the writing department or translation, because New York branch, their translation or their writing department would send files of the Watchtower and Awake magazines or any publications to the different branches to have them print in their own language. So Italy was printing some English, some obviously Italian, and some German. So because they had certain presses there that could print the way that New York Bethel branch or the Watchtower would have their presses. Like they bought these nice, really big presses. And so I had to learn a lot of stuff there, just because when you're at Bethel, it was a smaller location. However, I got to be in the book bindery. I got to work there. I got to see, how the belt works and how every phase of putting the books together or the Watchtower together, so I got to learn all that. The big printing presses, I got to see how those were. It was cool. I mean, I have to say, I never thought I would have to spend that kind of time. But so I'm a musician. and naturally I gravitate to other musicians. It's just like we have this chemistry that we recognize, just like if you're a musician, I'm a musician, like there's something beyond just being a witness. Like you have an extra added connection with somebody, which I think is kind of
Sure.
cool.
Yeah.
And so he was a musician. He had long hair. He played. He was from Britain, UK, and we had a lot of stories. So he had his guitar and stuff. And there was a visit of a governing body member, brother. It was either Sidlick. It was older. No, it was probably Jairus. It was either Jairus. It was the older crew that's all dead now. So all those guys are in the grave. But
Yeah.
it was one of those guys that came. Swingle, that's who it was, Brother Swingle. And if you go back to like the 80s or 90s, whatever, that's who he was. So anyway, so we were doing a family night, and they would have a family night. They wanted musicians, and they knew I was a musician, so they put a band together. And this circuit overseer and a couple others, so we were like the backup band for some of these Bethelites that got to sing and do different acts or whatever. So that was fun. Anyhow, so the circuit overseer and I, we were pretty close, and we would talk a lot. And my wife was working in the cleaning crew with his wife. And so one morning they were going to clean the different dorms, like the dormitory rooms, et cetera, that they would be cleaning. And they didn't see the sister, the circuit overseer's wife typically would be there, like going and helping, working with another sister, like they worked in pairs or something.
She didn't show up.
And she didn't show up. So they were like, where is she? And she wasn't in her room. So they were down in an area where apparently it was either below where the rooms were, something like where the laundromat was, or the sink, and like a basement area, whatever. And they went down and they heard screams, and these two sisters discovered her body hanging from the ceiling pipes. She had hung herself on the ceiling pipe. Imagine like just walking and you see this sister that you had seen at breakfast and all, every day working with, and all of a sudden you just look up and you see her, she just strangled herself. Oh man.
Gosh.
What
age bracket would you put her in?
Like probably 40s. Like maybe mid 40s, early 40s, mid 40s. She was attractive, blonde. I think she was German descent.
Oh my God. Well, you probably are aware, as probably a lot of my followers are, that one of my big, what's the word I want? Things I do on this channel is to bring awareness of the high rates of suicide within the organization. So that's an interesting story.
And the sad part about it, it was
so sad.
It was swept under the rug. It was as if it never happened.
Wow.
I mean, I don't even believe they called law enforcement or anybody.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how they handled it, but it was all hush hush. It was kept very, very quiet, and that's one of the reasons why I want to be outspoken about things, because just because the rank and file or the average publisher isn't aware of things doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah, and it's even even happening at a higher level than the regular rank and file.
So those were things that, again, you stack these things over time, it starts to have an impact on your faith. You're recognizing maybe this isn't the truth. Maybe this is just no different than a company. It's just the way it was being run was just like a business. Like you're just running, you have a CEO, you have the CFO, you have the COO. I mean, it's almost sad that people, and it took me a while because, look, I have love and fondness for the people that I got close to.
So do I. Yeah.
Right. My daughter is still active. She's married to a brother, and my brother is still an elder, active.
Wow.
So, it's hard for me to try and, like you say, you are woke, like you woke up, not the
Woke
woke
up. Yeah.
from the political woke, but yeah, you're
Right,
awake,
right.
and what I recognize is how many people we can help, because every story just might reach somebody. Somebody might connect the dots, and somebody might say, he doesn't sound like he has hatred, because I don't. I mean, look, I spent all those years. I don't feel it's a waste. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was talking to my son, and everything we go through in life, it's not a waste. It's a learning experience. Just take it as part of what makes you who you are, right?
Absolutely.
You
Yes.
know, and I don't regret. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how many times I've been married or divorced, but it's unfortunate that sometimes maybe you don't belong in a relationship, or you don't belong in a cult, or you don't belong in a situation that is hurting you, is harming you emotionally, mentally, psychologically, right? So, for me, I felt that when I learned the truth back when I first started studying, and then fast forward to, say, the last maybe 5 to 6, 7 years, it's like that zeal, I still love truth. And that's one of the reasons why I have uncovered things that were not true. So if you want to call it the truth, and someone calls you out on it and says, well, wait a minute, you say that you have the truth, but I just showed you black and white that you don't, that this
Mhm.
is false, that this is not, it's kind of like somebody calling you out on something that you are claiming, making a claim that you're telling the truth, but then you take a polygraph test and you can't pass it because you're not being truthful with yourself. And sometimes that's what we have to do, is we have to introspectively say, maybe I have to be honest with myself. If I'm finding things that others are just overlooking, I can't sweep it under the rug. I'm not going to hide these things, because they need to be brought out. I mean, look at, I couldn't wear a beard. No brother could have a beard back. I remember you couldn't even, like, your hair had to be clean. You had to have a full suit and tie. I mean, oh my God, I used to work at the Men's Warehouse. I got a job at the Men's Warehouse just so I could buy like 10 grand worth of suits at a discount. And I used to have all the brothers come and buy suits off of me, because, I was a manager at a store that could sell them suits. And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're going to look great in this. Okay. Yeah, I'll get you a
Rito
jacket.
Suave.
I'll hook you up, brother. Because look, I don't mind wearing the suit. I mean, I haven't worn it now because I'm not, like, I mean, you have to find reasons to wear a suit, but man, it's like every meeting you have to wear a suit and tie, and especially if you're an elder, whatever, you couldn't even. I remember brothers who, when it was hot, blazing saddles hot, they wouldn't let you take your jacket off. I'm like, dude, I'm sweating bullets here. Like, let me just at least take my jacket. No, you can't get up on the platform without a jacket. You got to have a jacket on the platform.
Oh
Like,
my God.
where does it say that? Like, are you making these? These policies are man-made, just like the religion is man-made. It's all man-made, and the more you see how they change these policies, that shows you how it's just policies that they can make up and say, oh yeah, let's decide to let sisters wear slacks now. Sure, you can wear slacks. Or let's decide to just do. It's like, okay, what's the next thing? Oh, we're not going to call it. What's the latest revision they're making on? Oh, now you're removed.
Yeah,
Now
instead of disfellowshipped, now you're removed from the congregation. Yeah.
So, okay. So what's the next level? Like, okay, maybe in the next 6 months, or who knows, what's the next going to be? Well, we're not going to we're not going to even say remove anymore, and we're not going to shun anymore. Why? Because countries like Norway
Or yes,
and
or defunding them for their
Romania, right,
policies.
right,
Yeah.
and those are the types of changes that you could have made 100 years ago. You could have, or let's see, 50 years ago. Because when was it? I think it was 1952. That was it. Brother Noor. It was either Brother Noor or when Fred Franz first became president. It was right in that time frame where you could now be considered disfellowshipped, even if you wanted to disassociate. Like if you just, how like if
Yeah,
you
tell us
were,
about that.
yeah. So if I was a Catholic, before I could get baptized as a Jehovah's Witness, I had to write a letter to the Catholic Church telling them I no longer wanted to be on their books as known as a Catholic, right? So that's disassociating. So I had to disassociate. They teach you how to disassociate from false religion, right? To become baptized as a JW. So now I want, or somebody wants to do the same thing with the JWs. What do they have to do? Why, like I can still go talk to my Catholic buddies just because I wrote them a letter saying that I no longer want to be on your book rolls as a Catholic. I'm no longer considering myself as a Catholic. Is that all it takes? So I write a letter, and brothers have done that. I've seen and have heard many brothers have written letters to the branch and just say, please remove me from your list. I no longer want to be considered as a Jehovah's Witness. Doesn't mean I don't want to be friends with you. Doesn't mean I don't want to be your, brother. I mean, look, I call people brother. Hey, brother. Like the dudes that I'm in a band with, I refer to them as, hey, brother. Hey, man, what's going on, brother?
Yeah,
So,
it's an affectionate term.
so why can't we still continue to be affectionate that way? Jesus, taught us to be affectionate with the Greeks had 4 ways of loving somebody. So why can't we just have love based on principle? Agape is principle,
Mm-hmm.
philia or philia or whatever is based on
Yeah, I know what
brotherly
you're talking
love.
about. Mm-hmm.
Storge is family, and eros is romantic. So if I just want to have principled love, why? Where does this whole idea of shunning come in? How do you show principled love if you're going to shun somebody? That's not principled love. I mean, are you
That's right.
serious? You see somebody broken down with a flat tire on the side of the road. Oh, I'm supposed to shun that person. I can't pull over and show principled love. Really? So that's where a lot of us have gotten just hurt emotionally to say, if this was really the truth, then you would have that as an identifying mark, is this principled love, this agape love. For me, that's what you used to preach to me. So now, because I'm critical, I have some critical questions. I don't necessarily agree with everything. I'm not saying, that you guys are bad news completely. I'm just saying that you went way too far. Like it's kind of like back when you were more neutral, over the years, you just eventually went way extreme. Like now you're just too extreme. You're just way out there in left field. And that's what's scaring people. People are like, wait a minute, this isn't the group that I originally attached myself to. And that's how I felt. I felt like over the last probably 10 years, I just started little by little to feel like, man, this isn't what I signed up for, kind of thing.
Mhm.
This
I do
isn't.
have a quick question. I am backing up here, and maybe we already covered it, but did you tell us anything about your temporary circuit work
No. Yeah. So
before we get into how you woke up from this high control group? can you tell us about your time in the um,
Temporary
circuit work?
circuit work.
Circuit
So
work.
being at Bethel, Italy, one of the privileges that I didn't want to just stay as a Bethelite, because there were opportunities to help in the Italian and in the English, because they had a small English congregation. So, you know, you're in a foreign country, you speak Italian, okay, why don't you just help the Italians? So that's sort of where the assignment was going. So they said, well, if you want, you can become a missionary and you can be like a temporary circuit overseer, like during assemblies and conventions. You know, we can use you to help out and giving Italian talks, and also for the small English group, because there was a small English group, and they would categorize me as missionary status. So I'd have kind of like a missionary slash temporary CEO, like assistant to the circuit overseer. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I forget how many months went by, but I decided I must have got homesick, because all I remember was at some point something happened. I don't know if it was with the country or politically, or something happened back at the States. And I wanted to just come back, because I think there was something going on, either with my wife at the time's parents, mother, or mine, or something.
Okay.
So we ended up cutting that short, instead of, because the goal was we could have stayed there and grown old there. You know, like we could have just ended up
Yeah.
staying there until whenever. Which, when I think back, you know, a lot of times I do regret leaving. I mean, I don't know. You know, you can't always, I mean, I try not to think of the past and decisions that I made, or just because once you make a decision, it's done and you can't go
Yeah.
back. It's just, you just have to live with it, and learn from it. But sometimes I would think back and I just say, well, you know what? I guess I just have to take a trip to Italy then, don't I? Or, you know, like just because I do have friends that are on Facebook and stuff, and they'll say, oh, look at, you know, they're sending me pictures from Italy. And I have a unique situation. I can actually apply for dual citizenship, because both my parents were born in Italy. And if I get dual citizenship, whoever I'm with, we can travel just like without needing a passport. We can go through and become part of the Euro system, because it's like you can go into any country as long as you're in those countries that are part of the Euro.
Okay.
Then you don't need a passport. It's kind of like here. It's like going from state to state. You don't need to show ID or whatever into every state that you go in. So that's sort of what having a dual citizen, because I just show up and I'm Italian. And I was like, oh, wow, you're Italian. Cool. And then I can go into Switzerland, Germany, Austria, you know, wherever, without having to show a passport. Whereas that's what you used to have to do before.
Okay.
So
circling around to how you finally kind of started waking up, what did that look like and how did that transpire?
So it started with these events that just started to pile up that had me questioning. And the 1914 thing was big, because that I had always avoided giving that talk. I had seen that outline and I didn't want to give that talk, because I wasn't buying into how the numbers were adding up. And I used to hear other brothers give the talk, and I'm like, dude, you're losing me, man. You're losing me. Like, you're just going in and out, and just like, you got to wrap your head around this, and then you got to have a calculator to figure out all these freaking numbers.
You have to do mental gymnastics, and then you still don't even understand it. Yeah.
When you get people confused, they leave. That's basically the bottom line. And so yeah, it's like, dude, you know, keep it simple, stupid, you know, keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple. Yeah, keep it simple,
yeah. How does that?
kiss.
Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah.
And it was getting too complicated. So that started the thing.
And so you didn't want to give that outline when you were told to give a talk. You were like, I'm not giving that outline, right?
Yeah, I had, I was
Because I'm
fortunate.
not buying into it. It doesn't even make sense.
No, I couldn't. And that was one of the things that kind of was making me mad is that, sometimes you have somebody that you can let your hair down with, like we can talk and say what we really think is going on.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I would have a couple brothers like that, but you would never say that to the rank and file or, platform or whatever. But, I could get away with just saying, man, it just doesn't add up, man. It's like
So other
something.
elders, a few other elders were kind of agreeing with you on that.
Even that circuit overseer that I met in Italy, when the musician thing that we had going on, because we had a cool chemistry, we had a good connection. There were things that he and I just were like, yeah, something's off here,
Mm-hmm.
But you know what they would always say? We would always say, we just have to wait on Jehovah. Just have to wait on Jehovah.
That's the answer to everything. Yeah.
Just wait on Jehovah. Jehovah's going to answer. He's going to answer your prayer.
Don't question. Just wait on it. Yeah.
He's going to deal with it. He knows. He sees everything. He knows what's going on. He's going to answer. I'm like, okay, 100 years later. And the other thing that really would get me was Jesus took kingdom power in 1914. Well, I never could match up the verse in Psalm where it said that Jesus was, when he went back to heaven, he went to sit at the right hand of the Father. So I'm like, okay, if he's at the right hand, then he's not on the throne. He's not king then. So I would put that before a couple elders from time to time just to see what they would say, just like out in field service and stuff. They say, well, he might not be sitting as the king, but he's in a throne, or how did they word it? He was trying to I'm like, man, it's just a bunch of semantic BS. Don't give me that. That's just, you're trying to find an excuse to say that it doesn't add up. It doesn't. And then, of course, I was with the advent of the internet. Now you didn't have bound volumes anymore. Now you could just go online. And of course, with jw.org, that really opened things up because it got people surfing. Since you were going to go online anyway, and you might as well YouTube. Thank you to YouTube in a lot of ways, because YouTube, before all the censorship stuff started, YouTube, you could find anything. I mean, you could do a search for almost anything and you would find somebody would post something. It was either an outline or it was something that was leaked. And then all these podcasters started coming out of the woodwork, like yourself and so many others. Because I thought I was going to do a channel called either Truth Quest or Quest for Truth. But I never, it's just got so busy with stuff. I just was like, oh, I'll do it. I'll do it later, But I did have
it is a huge commitment. Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, we've been talking, but it's so powerful because when you edit this all down, you get the real meat for people to say, man, thank you, and just like when I saw your channel the first time and I listened to some of the experiences, that's what made me reach out, because I thought, wow, maybe I should share my story, maybe somebody might connect the dots and it might help somebody.
Yeah. Everybody has a voice, everybody has a journey, and sharing all of that, it does help other people. Absolutely. There is somebody in the world that you're going to help, and they're going to thank you for speaking out.
Yeah.
That's what helped me wake up. Yeah.
And that's really a continuous thing. I have a buddy down here in Florida. So I'm in Cape Coral, Fort Myers, which is on the southwest side of Florida. So if you kind of visualize what's going on, I had a brother who, this is funny, but he got baptized. I used to study with him and his family. when I was in Boston. And his whole family came in the truth. He came in the truth. And then he moved down to Florida about 15 years ago. And slowly he just sort of drifted. And now he wrote a book called The Spiritual Quest. That's the name of his book.
Okay.
And he's just way out into like the cabal and no, not the cabal. Excuse me. That's not the word that I meant. Kabbalah. This is group that believes like in the original Hebrew, but they just go way off into these spiritual rabbit holes that everybody is God. Like he feels and he believes that now he is God, and when you die, you are God. Like you don't really die. Like it's kind of like I'm trying to reel him into being grounded, but I'm not gonna. I mean, he's still my buddy. I still, he's a musician too, so we kind of hang out.
Well, and that's the cool thing when you leave a high control group, you can be friends with people that have other different ideas.
Totally.
Fine.
And that's what I love about how I am now. Like I respect everybody's voice and whatever they think, whatever they believe. I know what I feel. I know what my thoughts are, and if they want me to share them, I will. But I'm not going to like fire hose anybody like I used to, or try to preach with, get it like if like somebody is like I'm big into health, so I try to help like be a coach for people that want to have better health, want to look younger, want to feel younger. Like I love music. Music to me is my drug. Like that's
so good. Yeah.
That's kind of how I get high, is playing music, because it makes me go into another place, which, that's sort of what I had before. Like I started playing when I was a kid. And when I became a witness, I sort of paused it for a little bit, which, okay, it just was something that I guess I felt I had to do. But then,
which is too bad. It's too bad that you couldn't pursue that more.
But guess what happened? I paused it for probably 2 or 3 years while I got married, because my first wife didn't really appreciate music like I did, right? And that's the one thing, like you got to find a connection with somebody that loves music too. Because
absolutely, yeah.
If you don't, man, then it's like, what do we have in common? It's like, okay, I married you because we think at the time we thought alike, but like the things that really I have deep inner connections to, like music, you just don't have. So I paused it for about 2-3 years, but then guess what? All of a sudden, this brother asked me, "Hey, can you teach me how to play drums?" And then that's all I needed. Like,
oh,
boom.
That's cool. Yeah,
I started back into it. And next thing I know, all these musician witnesses are coming out of the woodwork. Larry Graham, like, I at the time it was like Michael Jackson, Prince. Oh my goodness, there was just so many bands that I knew, like name bands, celebrity bands that were like either connected with the witnesses or knew about the witnesses or whatever. And so for me, it was great. I got to study in California. I don't know if I told you this, but man, when I lived in California, I learned so much from Aretha Franklin's studio drummer. I used to drive to Oakland, an hour and a half each way, which was like, I only did that twice a month. And at the time, I was paying like what would be equivalent today to like $100 a half hour.
And that was for like lessons or coaching?
Right. Coaching, lessons, technique. Because one of the things about any instrument that we play, or just any work that you do, you have to be careful that you don't either get carpal tunnel or that you don't get arthritis, because technique, like some of these drummers, like Aerosmith's, my buddy played with Aerosmith when, what's his name? Joe Perry, the guitar player for Aerosmith, broke away from Steve Tyler for a little bit. He started his own band called the Joe Perry Project. And my buddy Joe Pett from Boston joined and played. And he's like 70, I think he's 70 right now, something like that. But anyway, I was talking to him. he looks good. I mean, he's jacked. He works out a lot and stuff like that. But he's got arthritis in both his hands because
Mhm.
his technique was so. He used to, like when he was playing drums, he would play them like he was hammering nails. I'm like,
Mm.
dude, that's playing drums is not hammering nails. Like, what are you trying to do? And that's what happened. So it's little things like that. Look, I believe that if we take care of ourselves, take care of our mind, keep active, who knows how long we can live, but you can definitely have a better quality of living. And to me, if I can do something musically till I drop, I'm there, man. You know,
Love that. I love that. I love that. Was there a catalyst, like, was there anything, what would they say? The straw that broke the camel's back that brought you out of the cult?
it was a combination of the lie of not admitting to the 607 and 587 or 537.
The destruction of Jerusalem?
That really started the ball rolling for me because I started uncovering if that was false. So if the premise started,
Can you tell the viewers a little about that, just in a real short,
yeah. So
if they've
when
never looked into that?
right, so the Gentile times, what Jehovah's Witnesses would do is they would have a pivotal point or a starting point to measure how long the Gentile times from when Israel no longer had kings until Jesus would arrive on the scene. And then beyond that, till when he would be enthroned as king in the heavens. And the idea was that from the start of the destruction of Jerusalem, um, the Watchtower organization, their number was 607, but historically and even
And it
chronologically,
still is. It still
scripturally,
is.
it still is. They're off because the actual number chronologically from scripture and from historical archaeological finding shows it was 537. So
That's right.
that's a big gap. So instead of 1914, because they took a prophecy of a day for a day for a year, and the king Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it was 7 years, and they multiplied it. Again, you go into all these metric numbers that comes out with 2,520 years from 537, not 607. It takes you to like 1930 or something, 1935, or it's off. So instead of 1914, which means if nothing happened in 1914 through 1919, then all this nonsense about the faithful and discreet slave and appointing the domestics and all that's nonsense, nothing happened, then it's a hoax. Their whole how it's like a house of cards. It's built on a
It's a
hoax.
house of cards. It's yeah. Please do your research if you haven't done that. That was a great synopsis of it, but do your research on the 587 versus 607 BCE.
587. Yeah, 587.
Yeah,
That's what I meant.
compared to the witness, view of the 607. They're the only ones on earth that believe that, and
Right.
it's just insane. Like it, yeah. It's mind
Because
blowing.
if that is off, if then what else is off? And then the idea of the policies, the adjustment, the shunning was the other one. So it was the 1914 and then the shunning
Okay.
policy.
Okay. What about the shunning?
The shunning is unscriptural. There is more damage, emotional and mental damage physiologically that occurs just like when you're in a relationship with, like, say, an abusive person. That is, it has studies show that it has physiological effects on a person. You can get a brain tumor from it.
Mm-hmm.
You can get cancer from it. You can get all kinds of diseases because of stress. And shunning is causing people not just to commit suicide, because obviously you've seen people who have committed suicide because their world has been stolen. I mean,
Yeah, we have one of the highest rates of suicide of any, not we, because I'm not in it anymore, but Jehovah's Witnesses have the highest rate of suicide of any high control group or religion or cult. Yeah.
so that's a serious fact. And I just, again, I'm more of an empath. I care about what affects other humans. And for me, it's about showing love. And I feel that has disappeared from this organization. And so if it disappears from the organization, doesn't mean that I can't have a relationship with God. It just means that the man made pieces of many of these churches, these religions, these cults, these mind control groups. Maybe they meant well when they were original. You know what I was telling my son the other day, because he's like me. He's not baptized, but he and I were talking, and I said, "Isn't it interesting that back when Charles Russell, the first president of the Watchtower, or maybe not even really the first president, but the first one whose name was associated, was called the Bible students. The Bible students. So why couldn't they just continue to just be students? Like, we're all students, right? We're all
Sure.
learning. We're just students. We're just studying. Then it doesn't give you this sense of, well, you're over me, or I'm controlling you, or no, we're all the same. We're all in the same boat. We're all just students. That way there's no fear of critical thinking. It's like, well, if you don't believe that this is the truth, that this is Jehovah's physical organization, or earthly organization, he has a heavenly organization, an earthly organization. Well, what if it's not an organization the way you construct it? Because if you read Crisis of Conscience by Ray Franz, the problem he saw was that they stopped using the Bible when they were in their conferences and having meetings, and they started just referring to the organization. We can't do this because it's not organizational. They use everything but the Bible in those meetings, and that's what threw him out, because he started losing his love was for the fact that he loved Scripture. And if I'm someone who loves Scripture and you stop using Scripture in the most important fundamental things to make this thing run, okay, it really starts, it gives you a bad taste, and you just lose the zeal, or it's like, you guys, it can't be from God. This is not.
And Judge Rutherford, the second president, isn't that how they referred to him? Judge Rutherford. He took it to a whole nother level and made it a business. Just do your research, because he really is the one that turned it into a business and took it to a whole different level. That is mind blowing.
Joseph Rutherford. One thing
Joseph
that
Rutherford, yeah.
you can find out if you just go online and you can see some of the early writings. He loved drinking. To say he was an alcoholic would be an understatement. He loved drinking, and he loved control. And what he did when he became president after Charles Russell died, he kicked out everybody who was a follower of Russell.
Yes.
Leave Bethel. Get out. We don't want you. And brought in his own crew, his own team. And that's
right. And isn't he the one that made them shave their beards?
Yeah.
Because he didn't want them to look like
they were Russell. Part of Russell, right?
Yeah, because Russell had the big beard, the original president, And when Joseph Rutherford, no, yeah, came into power, basically, like he didn't want anybody admiring the former president of the company, and so
Right.
made them shave their beards. It's fascinating, very
It,
fascinating.
it is very fascinating because that's one of the things that I liked to do the research in. These kids today, I mean, these new witnesses over the last 15 probably years have no clue
No, they don't.
who started the Jehovah's Witness, who the first or early adopters were or early founders, and the history, like you were just talking about, shaving the beards, changing policy, changing principles, and then of course you get fast forward to Nathan Noor was the third dude who was the president, and Noor did some interesting things. He was just getting in when the disfellowshipping thing started, because they didn't believe in disfellowshipping before 1952, because I think there's kingdom ministries and even awakes that showed how the Catholic Church, what they would call disfellowshipping, they used the term excommunication.
Mm-hmm.
So they would excommunicate, and the articles that Watchtower would publish was how pagan the practice of excommunication was.
It
And here they,
was. And then
and
within 5 years, they adopted the practice. I
so
have a whole
like,
video on it. Yeah.
what's up with that, man? Come on. It's like, so it just, as you peel these things away, guys,
Yeah, it's like
it
an onion. You're peeling away the onion.
don't fear knowledge if it is empowering you to have wisdom, because you need to protect your heart and your brain. You need to protect the mind. And the problem is that there's so much, I call it fake news, like, a former president, uh, refers to the fake news. Media, the propaganda is so fake. It's the same thing. To me, like when you're listening to jw.org, a lot of that, how do you fact check it? How do you know if it's just fake news, if it's fake propaganda? Unless we can sit here and say, okay, Stephanie, you're going to look up, let's fact check a particular topic right now, and we'll fact check something. And, it might take you a little bit, but you'll get to the point where it's like, oh, wait a minute, like we did with 607 versus 587. You fact check that, you see that that was not the date, or you fact check something else. What really is going on in some of these other countries that they don't want, like the the Australian
Royal
Council
Commission, the
w-
Australian Royal Commission.
with the governing body member, not
Jeffrey
Anderson,
Jackson.
Jackson. Hey,
Jeffrey Jackson, yeah.
hey, Jeffrey, baby, what's up, man? What's happening? I see that you were a little bit off on your explanation of a very staunch principle that Jehovah's Witnesses. What was the question that he was asked? How we feel about corporal punishment? Well, that was one of them.
Okay.
Like,
Go ahead.
well, where is the scripture? Like, how do you? The question was asked, like, how do Jehovah's Witnesses apply that? And we always said, do not hold back the rod. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like from
Yep.
Proverbs. Well, he sugarcoated that thing, man. He was like, oh, we don't do any physical, like we believe corporal punishment and communication, da da da. Come on, man. That's all BS. It's all kinds of BS. What was the other one that he?
The most famous one, when he was on the witness stand, was they asked him if he thought they were the only. What was the I can't think of it.
Oh, the two witness rule. Wasn't it the two witness rule?
No, that's not the one I was thinking of. Like they were, God's spokesman on earth.
Oh, right. That's right.
And then he like got real quiet for a second and like, well, we all know they say they are God's spokesman on earth, that they are God's channel. and he lied on the witness stand in court and said, well, that would be presumptuous of us to say that.
Right, right. Now I remember. Yep.
Shocking. I'm like, oh my God, these leaders are lying. They're lying in court. Like, it was just shocking. Yeah. Shocking.
That's a good point.
And
So
you can Google all that and see it for yourself.
right.
Yeah. And yeah.
And
Yeah.
to fast forward to today, and that's how I look at everything that I see now is whether it's on social media from TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, there's just so much Rumble. I mean, there's certain platforms where censorship is not such an issue. Although I know I know you can upload stuff to YouTube. Maybe you are unable to search it in terms of keywords, but it's still on YouTube. They just won't let you find it. It's almost like when you label it as private. So what we do is you have a website, or like some of these people have pages now where you can go and click on, what's that? JW Facts, I think, is one of them.
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful site, jwfacts.com. All they have is facts on there. It's not people's opinions. It's not, in fact, most of it reverts you back to jw.org. Yeah, it's pure facts. It's called jwfacts.com. It's helped so many people wake up, including some of my family members. Yeah.
I'm reading an interesting book. I was following a guy who died during COVID by the name of Rob Skiba. He had a Facebook channel, and he also had some YouTube stuff. And one day he had a podcast, and he invited a guy by the name of Lex Meyer, who wrote a book called Immortal. And I bought the book, and it's so fascinating. A lot of what he says is the core beliefs that I think Russell had way back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, when they were looking at certain principles that, undisputed, like not this crap stuff that just takes you off into a different tangent. Anyhow, it's fascinating. If anyone who, obviously, I still maintain my spiritual connection. So I have a spiritual connection just with myself and where I am, because I something about why, again, and this is my own opinion, I'm not saying that everybody who hears me say this, but when I was a kid, like I was telling you in the beginning, I used to see my grandfather read the Bible every day at 3:00. This guy lived to be 91 or 92. And he subliminally impacted me that way. Spiritually, I just don't know what it is, but I believe that there was something to it. It was more than just, going out in field service and doing all this stuff like, oh yeah, it's not like once saved, always saved, but there is a mechanism.
You can definitely have a spiritual side to you without being a Jehovah's Witness.
Amen. And that's what I think a lot of this has revealed. It's exposed the fact that we don't need you, Mr. 80-year-old governing body, to tell me whether I'm going to be resurrected when I die or what. Okay. One interesting thing that I am sort of leaning on, this guy who wrote this book, Immortal, says that nobody has gone to heaven yet. So all these guys that, these governing body members that said, oh yeah, as soon as they die, they used to call it a Bethel, a launching pad. When the governing body members, boom, it's like, beam me up, Scotty, like a Star Trek kind of thing. It's like, okay, can you see me? Hey, can you see me yet?
Yeah.
It's comical, man. It is so comical. I feel like writing a song about it.
I would like to ask you one thing. Does we talked about your son. Does your daughter talk to you?
Only text.
Okay.
She'll text me if I text her sometimes. Like I just was like, I said, how was the convention? Oh, it's great. You got to go. You got to go to Friday. The drama's great. Saturday, drama's great. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to go. I said, I'll see, where there is one close by or something like that. But, like if I say something like that, she'll get all excited and like she'll communicate to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
Okay.
it's,
But other
it's
than that, she kind of shuns you.
right.
Okay.
I've
Interesting.
invited her. I've invited her to come to my shows to bring,
Where you're in the band, yeah, doing uh-huh.
because it's music. I mean, I'm
It's
playing.
neutral. It's
It's
neutral.
neutral, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, because I know she loves music. I know he likes music, but I know her mom poisoned her mind because my critical thinking. Because I question things and I don't just accept things because it's coming because it's printed in a Watchtower magazine. Am I not allowed to question it? Am I not allowed to be critical of it? That doesn't mean, why can't you debate things? Learn how to have discussions, learn how to have conversations. You don't have to agree with everything I say, or you don't have to agree with everything. I don't have to agree with everything you say, but we can have conversations where, just like we're doing now, we're just, I never thought of that. That's a good point. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
that brings up a really important point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is so important for people to realize, is that if it's the truth, any truth for that matter, the truth will live up to scrutiny. And Jehovah's Witnesses are not programmed to use critical thinking skills. They're not allowed. In fact, it's prohibited. It's prohibited to use critical thinking skills. But I think everybody in their core knows that the truth will live up to scrutiny.
I agree. That's well put. Well put. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like a brother once told me a long time ago. You just reminded me of it. When you get to a door and they raise an objection or something and you don't have the answer for it, say to yourself, there isn't truth to that. There is an answer. And you would always say, well, you know what? That's a great question. Let me do some research and I'll get back to you on that. And so, why can't they do the same thing? If I
Yeah.
bring up a question or you bring up a question, and it comes across maybe a little critical, because that's what critical thinking is. It's sort of self-thinking. I'm thinking on my feet, you're thinking on your feet for yourself, and you just pose a question like, so who actually does get a resurrection, or when does the Bible say that a resurrection would happen, or why wouldn't Adam and Eve get a resurrection, or do Adam and Eve get a resurrection? Asking these questions that there is no definitive, maybe there's no black and white answer, but there isn't a way for you to just feel like, well, I kind of think it's this and you might think it's not. But can we still go out to lunch together, or can we still, hang out? I mean,
Right.
I can't hang out with you because you're judging.
These 9 men in upstate New York make rules that
and,
they
and
keep changing. They keep changing the rules. They keep moving the goalpost farther and farther, and no, yet all these, well, there's a lot that are questioning it now and leaving, but there are so many that still don't question it. They're just like, "Oh, okay, we'll just," like robots, like, "Oh, okay, we'll just keep believing this shit."
I find that fascinating that you said that. Is that not judging? Isn't there a scripture that says, let no man judge, only God?
That's
So
right. But they
how,
judge. They do judge, but that's
right.
what the Bible says. Yeah.
So if I don't have a beard, if I do have a beard, if I don't agree with you on that or not, isn't your making a rule in essence, judging anyone who doesn't follow your man-made rule.
Yeah.
That's
And then once you start looking into all of that, it's just a house of cards, and you realize, oh my gosh, this is like no other religion out there. It's or cult. It's just a man-made thing, and it's it's it can be difficult to accept or to like come to grips with, but
right.
it's also very freeing when you let yourself go there.
Yeah.
So, is there anything you'd like to I think we've summed up pretty much everything, but is there anything you'd like to add before we close out here?
There's just, I would just say, question and always have an open mind, whoever is out there, if you are still an active, because PMO, physically in, mentally out, is how many are putting up with it. They're just going through the motions in this PMO state. And so that's what I feel a lot of witnesses, just are going to continue to do it. I probably was a PMO for quite a while before I just stopped. So,
Yep, physically and mentally out. That's what they call that. Yeah.
I mean,
And it's
because,
sad because a lot of PMOs, and I have some in my own family
right,
that they are PMOs because they live in fear
right,
of the shunning of
right,
of the shunning. And how sad is that to say I'm in a religion or a high control group that I can't even let anybody know that I think this is bullshit, because if
right,
I let them know, they're going to the rest of my family is going to shun me.
right.
What kind of quality of life is that to live under, and kind of domination to live under?
Yep.
It's sad. It's sad.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, I
that,
understand it, and I'm not judging it, by the way. I'm not judging it because I understand people have to do what they got to do. Uh, but I personally couldn't do that. I have to live to my true self, and I can't live by a lie and pretend. But even
and
if
that's
it
a
means
good point.
losing my children, I've lost my kids, but I can't live a lie. But
That,
I'm not judging those that do.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
that's, no, I was going to say that is a great way to feel, because what it allows you to do is to not limit or restrict yourself from, like, let's say I'm not doing anything that I would be disfellowship right now. Okay.
Right.
But just because I play in a band, I perform, I interact with people, I try to create a good message, I try to drop people's attention to the goodness of humanity and what we've been given, because my core still feels that we're made in his image. Like, there's got to be an intelligence that designed all this. Is too, like, we're above the animal realm
Mm-hmm.
for a
Yeah.
reason. And so intellectually we have that ability. Um, but yeah, it frees me up to do the things and say the things without having the fear of being judged and brought into some kind of chamber, the committee meeting, and so they're trying to minimize that a little bit now. That you hear the latest now is they're not going to be quick to arrest you and take you in,
Yeah.
handcuff you
That's
and put
the new
and
light. The new light. Yeah.
so it's interesting. Like I say, the less, it's almost like leave people alone unless it's something that really needs attention, something that really, I mean, geez, when people are having struggles financially and they don't have a place to live or something like that, take up a contribution, do that. Like put some effort into doing humanitarian things that would actually provide a real benefit,
Benefit. Mm-hmm.
tangible. Don't just give them, this like, okay, keep well fed and stay warm and keep well fed. It's like, F you, man. What the heck? How is that helping people? It's just words. How about show some action? I mean, I've done things, me personally, to help others when I've had the opportunity. And if I had the ability to, give people handouts or, give them money to help them, whatever, without expecting anything back. That's just how I feel. I will take somebody under my wings or something, or somebody needed a place to stay and I have a spare bedroom that's vacant or something, I can help somebody out for now. But, I remember when people would go to the elders, come to the congregation, and I had brothers when I was an elder come to me and say, hey, this sister has no food. She can't feed her kids. She just lost her job or whatever. She's going through a real tough time. Can we, and I remember a couple times we did take up a collection. Or the friends at a Kingdom Hall at a congregation would all go and bring food, and they would, somebody would just organize it and they'd just drop off a bunch of groceries and stuff. I mean, now you're talking,
And that's wonderful. But the organization itself that you may be donating to every month, maybe not. But when I did have it, I did, but they don't help the needy ones. It goes back to the people in the congregation, which, I mean, we, my husband and I, we had donated like money to people, and we would normally do it anonymously.
Right.
Just because, that's just what we chose to do. But but the organization itself doesn't do anything for people in need. It's very sad. Yeah.
And it could, just because they do like when people will their funds or their belongings, whatever they have assets, they will them to the society. Because I remember, I'm not going to mention names or anything, but just in case somebody's listening, one of my ex-wives might hear me say something, but I remember an elder who got a sister who was somewhat bad case of dementia or whatever. She was in her 90s, and got her to change her will to give her assets to this elder and will it to him.
Oh my God.
Instead of the Watchtower Society. So yeah, it's you hear all kinds of stories, man. Yeah.
Not surprising. Yeah, not surprising. Wow. Okay, one last thing to wrap this up. Don't you have a book out about drumming?
I have it. Let me grab it.
Okay, yes, I want to see it. And I will link it in the description below if anybody would like to order it, or you could let us know. Can they order? Can they? Yeah. I put it. Can they? I'm going to put it in the description below. They can order it, right?
Yep. If you just go in www.modernbeatmaker, it's just called Modern Beatmaker.
Awesome, great.
So yeah, I decided, it's like,
to help other drummers.
It's beginner to advanced. So it's anybody who, like little kids. I've heard of some pilots when they retire, they want to start playing drums. Drums it's an amazing thing, but it helps to soothe your nerves. It releases stress. It has a lot of things I've discovered for myself, mentally and just psychologically and so forth. Being able to play drums, you don't have to play in a band, but just to be able to sit down. I mean, I've seen women playing and men, and little kids playing. I taught my son when he was 2, just mama dada, real simple stuff. And this kid, when he was 5, was sitting in one of those Kmart drum sets I bought him.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so
Cool.
now, like he will sit on these that I have. These are I've got those are electric drums, so you can put headphones on and you can play it till
The
3 in the
ones
morning.
behind you?
The ones behind me, and then the ones that this is what I also play live. So that's the Joey B. So
Okay.
this was a concert. Actually, we had a professional photographer taking photos at the concert. So I was like, hey, send me a couple of those. And I didn't know I was going to write a book at the time. And then I decided, let me write a book. And then I may do courses. I may actually teach and do online courses so I could help, because if somebody
And
lives in
did you
another
do all
state.
of this after you left the cult?
Well, I did, yeah.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a success story.
I mean, there's so many things that we can do. I'm sure people have bucket lists that they say, oh, I want to get a chance to do this, want to do that. And there's just so many things that, like now I feel like I want to help others because as a Jehovah's Witness, technically you're giving your time, you're volunteering. So you have that sense of wanting to reach out to help. But now we just move it in a different direction. So if I can help somebody with their health,
Sure.
I just talked to, so I have a guy right now who he's a celebrity recording artist by the name of Lonza Bartlett. He played with, he does like Michael Jackson tribute, Stevie Wonder, stuff like that. But he toured with the Platters, this band called the Platters, kind of like the Four Tops.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Temptations, like that. And, so we're trying to do a Motown thing here. I'm trying to put a Motown thing together because you need Motown. People just like Motown. It's just got a certain, all the hits,
that's great.
classic stuff. So he just found out, he thinks he had an what's it called? An EEG, which is like an MRI for his brain, because he thinks he might have a brain tumor. And I said, oh my God, really? He's like 60, whatever, 62, 63. Looks great, but he's nervous. So I was trying to give him some pointers. There's certain things to treat it. But I'm one of those type of people that I always look for natural ways to fix something, like homeopathic natural ways to fix something.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm not one of these guys.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Thank you, by the way, for having me on. And I love.
We're coming up on 2 hours, so we're gonna wrap it up. But thank you so much for, oh my gosh, your amazing story and your amazing journey in and out of the cult. And I think it's gonna help a lot of people. So thank you so much for reaching out to me and wanting to share your story. I love it. And I know it like I said, it'll help a lot of people.
I'm changing my life and